Hi, and welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy. The goal of this podcast is to demystify therapy, what can happen in therapy, and the wide array of conversations you can have in and about therapy. Through personal experiences, guests will talk about therapy, their experiences with it, and how psychology and therapy are present in many places in their lives. With lots of authenticity and a touch of humor, here is your host, Steve Bisson.
Thank you, and welcome to episode 102. If you haven't listened to episode 101, go and listen to it. I think it's the first time I've done an episode without having notes of what I'm going to talk about. Talks a little bit about what happens after having a great event and so on and so forth. So please go listen to it. Came from the heart, so I hope you enjoyed that. But episode 102 will be with two firefighters, one of them being Eric Knox. He has been on the show before. And this time we have a brand new firefighter. No police this time. We're going to do first responders, firefighter only right now. His name is Brian Harkins. Brian is an Army vet and he worked for EMS for 32 years, is in the fire service for 20 years. He had a mental breakdown in 2015 where he had to go and get some support. He has learned a whole lot from this and has been hosting a weekly support group on Zoom and will be also part of a documentary for someone in regards to the fire service and getting the mental health. He's active on podcasts, preaches the importance of using your resources, including your family and friends. Can't wait to talk to them. So here is the interview. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 102 of Finding Your Way Through Therapy. I'm excited because finally we got rid of the cops, no police officers, no nothing, just real men, real firefighters. I know you guys have to be woken up to be here, so I appreciate it. But ultimately, I should stop making jokes because I don't know one of you. I know one of you, but I don't know the other one. I'm just joking, of course. But I think it's important because there's so many issues that are different in firefighting than it is for law enforcement, even though there are similarities, and I absolutely recognize that. But I wanted to bring that. And that's why I'm so happy that Eric Knox is coming back. Eric Knox has been on with us before. We didn't even get to half the questions he wanted answered, so we're going to work on that. And then Brian Harkins is a new person you've never met. And what I would like you guys to do is to kind of introduce yourself. And I'll start with you, Brian, because Eric, you know the drill. Brian, you may not know it. So tell a little bit about to my audience about yourself.
So I am a 32-year EMT and paramedic in emergency medical services. I was in the United States Army, served in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And as it turns out, that's where my issues started. I did some part-time police work, worked for the Department of Corrections before I got in the fire service, which I've now been at just about 20 years. Married, 4 kids, typical family guy. You know, now I'm doing a little bit more on the peer support side of things, which is how we met. And that's just the Reader's Digest version.
Well, first of all, thank you for serving. And not only for your armed forces, but going to DOC. That's service, if you ask me.
Appreciate it.
But thank you and welcome. And Eric, how about you introduce yourself?
I'm Eric Knox. I'm, I think, 24 years in the fire service in the Metro Boston area. EMT, have a couple kids. Just a great job we have. It's hard to explain, but I think if I said that, you'd understand. When people say it's the best job in the world, it really is.
Well, I've heard some disagreements from other people, but I think it's all about the mindset.
True.
But, you know, one of the things that we always talk about in finding your way through therapy is if you've ever been in therapy. Brian, I'm going to start with you. Have you ever been in therapy before for mental health or substance use or any of those things?
So I was not until I had my mental health breakdown in 2015, and I got forced into the system. So I was pulled from the streets after talking to state police homicide regarding a small child. And I was fortunate enough that I had a deputy chief and a fire chief at the time who understood and met me at the police station. And from there, I went to McLean's. And so I spent some time at McLean's Hospital in the leader program for first responders. Really opened my eyes to a whole new world. And then from there, once I got discharged, I went into weekly group therapy sessions. And to this day, I still attend. My life is pretty busy, but when I get a chance, there's some peer support groups, one on the North Shore, one out literally 10 minutes from my house that I try to attend when I get a chance. And it's been successful for me. And then, of course, we do the weekly peer support group meetings that I do every week for the last we'll be up on 3 years pretty soon. So,
Wow.
So I'm a big fan.
Well, I'm a big fan of the Leaders Program in McLean's. They do a great job, and this is in Belmont, Massachusetts. And what I've liked about Massachusetts, slowly but surely, we've expanded between the Leader Program. There's another one in Western Mass that I'm blanking right now. On site, which I know a few people there too. And then we have the program in Westboro for Westboro Behavioral Health that does a great job with first responders. We're really getting there slowly but surely. So happy for you. Not happy that you had a breakdown, but happy you got all the resources you needed. And I think people need to hear that, especially in the first responders world. How about you, Eric? How about you? Have you ever been in therapy?
I have. Yeah. As we all get older, we kind of just, I don't know, you run into things in life. And I was lucky enough to find a good guy and talk to him for a while and kind of got myself back on track. It's always really good to just understand the stresses of the job that we have. I mean, it comes down from some guys snoring to some really bad call. And just, it's been a strong benefit in my life. It really has.
One of the things that Brian talked about was group. Have you ever been in a group setting for first responders or fire?
I've been in one. It was pretty good, actually. It was awkward at first, and that first step to be vulnerable, to kind of open up and see other people and hear their stories and stuff. But it really helps. It helps you open up and help you realize, you're not alone. So
the reason why I ask, Eric, is that I know, Brian, you talked about your group for about 3 years. What led up to that day that started you to do that group for Zoom? I mean, I think that group is needed for the record for first responders. I'm on the record. I have led a group before. I think we just need more, but go ahead, Brian.
So during the height of the COVID, right around the end of October 2020, COVID was raging and everybody was losing their minds. And we had 8 suicides in 7 days in the metropolitan Boston area. And I knew 2 of them. And one of them was kind of tragic how it happened at Brockton Hospital. The backstory, it's always the backstories that get you, right? It's not somebody killed himself. It's usually the backstory behind it is what causes the stress for most of us. So I get a little pissed off. Like, nobody's doing anything, right? Everybody's sharing, I got your back, bro, on Facebook. But you're looking at that person saying 100% if I called them right now, they would not take the call. They would not want to hear it. But yet they look cool on Facebook. So I got mad. And I set up a Sunday group, which is the name of the group. And I just threw it together. And I said, I'm going to be here on Zoom for anybody that wants to talk every Sunday night from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And if nobody jumps on, then I'll play video games or do whatever I do. And I'll sign off at 9 and I'll call it a night. And I'll do this until I finally give up that nobody's showing up. And people showed up. I've had as many as 24. I've had as few as 4. I got a pretty solid core group right now. We have a doctor, a couple nurses, a couple retired firefighters. Every now and then we'll have some police officers because we just talked about their issues of joining. And they'll jump on and they'll talk. And not be shy to say that I have love for each and every single one of them that show up. We've had people that showed up in hoodies and dark rooms, and now they're laughing and joking and cracking jokes and having a good time because we've earned that trust from them. I'm not saying that we're better than anybody else. We're not professional counselors. We're just a voice to listen to, an ear. And we just share our stories and we offer resources. And that's one of the biggest things that we do is if somebody's struggling, hey, I've gone through this, I've done this. We've got some breath work coming up on the 29th of this month up in Newburyport. And the group's aware of it. And some people will show up and just kind of experience these different things that they wouldn't have known about had this group not been there. And I think one of the biggest things is that we're sharing resources instead of trying to keep them to ourselves. And that's been the biggest change that group has brought on for us.
When you say sharing the resources, I appreciate that more than most people, I'm pretty sure. But what type of resources are you talking about when you say that? Because my experience, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys all you're the expert, not me. But I've shared resources with first responders before. And for those of you on YouTube, you'll see me, but they grab the piece of paper and they say, that's great. And it goes in the back seat and they don't really look at it again. So how did you get them to use those resources, which is very fascinating to me?
So once they hear your story and they know and they trust what you're saying is true and accurate, they're more willing to listen. You can just throw me a pamphlet and say, hey, go check this person. I'm not going to do it. But when I sit there and I talk about the experience I had at Shatterproof.
Can you explain what Shatterproof is?
So Shatterproof is a first responder program out of Florida. They have a 30-day program, and it's like a college campus, and they do detox therapy and without boring you guys, but they have like a college dorm setting. And what they do is they put all the first responders in one section, and they have a pool, they have grills, they have stores. You're not locked in, you're not in shackles, you're not getting needles in your arm, you're not doing the medication shuffle where you're walking around like a zombie. They have weight rooms, they have music therapy, all these things that as a manly man, you're like, music therapy? That's freaking stupid. Until you see it in action. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Everybody's bawling their eyes out. And these are Chicago cops, manly men, built like fire hydrants, and they're bawling their eyes out at watching this. And it's just a program that said they're going to put their first responders together, and they separated the females. And the females like, no. I'm getting shot at with them. We're sleeping in the same dorms as these guys. We're going to the same structure fire as these guys. You're not separating us. And they were like, okay, together you are. So we're not sleeping in the same quad, the same little pod, but they're in the room next to us, and we're hanging out at the same place and the same time. And we went down there and really experienced what some of these other resources do, the music therapy and the breath work, and all of this information is just not known to people. So until you get to network and have these resources available, people wouldn't know that they exist. So I think it's one of the benefits of sharing our information, as opposed to just handing me a pamphlet or a flyer and saying, go check out this place. It's when I can actually tour it and talk about it and say, hey, listen, I was there. Like, this is a nice place. Like, I would go here if I had to, versus other places where you're like, wouldn't send my enemies there. So I think one of the benefits of touring these facilities and seeing what they do and talking to them live is important.
Eric, would you agree? Is that something that you see also in your department or other departments that you know about?
I know there are resources there, and it's true. Just trying to get people to be vulnerable enough to, or just open up and just not be the manly man that everyone seems to think firefighters are, but we're real people. Unfortunately, that stigma is there. It just is. I mean, I hear it. I don't want to say I hear it every day at work, but it's there. I do know a couple of people who've gone to Florida, and I'm going to assume that it's that program. And the two people that I do know benefited tremendously. I just want to say that. But there are resources, but the problem is just getting people there. It just, even just having that conversation, like, the coffee table, or just even on the apparatus floor or wherever, just talking with your buddies. It can get a little weird at times, but at least for me, that group setting definitely opened me up to more talking to people about what I do, where I've been, what I need, and not, I don't want to say be ashamed, but almost be proud of it. You kind of learn that there's nothing wrong with you. There isn't. You're just a human being that just needs a little bit of help in a little different way. So
I think you hit the nail on the head, in my opinion. The shame and pride usually takes over the vulnerability. And I don't know, you guys can tell me, but for me, I've learned a long time ago, and if you've listened to this podcast for the 102 plus episodes that I've done, I really don't care if you don't like me, in the sense that I'll be me. So if it's me that you don't like, it's okay. And not everyone has to like me, and I'm okay with that. And other people like me, and that's okay. And I appreciate that too. But ultimately, I think that when you talk about shame or pride, I think authenticity is the other part that really has to come through.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys agree or.
Yeah, no, it's truth. But it's hard. It's hard for, I mean, I don't say men in general, but it's hard. It's hard.
What are you saying? I'm not a man, Eric?
No, but especially like if you're in that bad place or just under stress, or God, just dealing with the pile of stuff life gives you every day. If you're really not good with yourself and you'll be able to step back and see that, well, darn, those two are just going to take over. They're gonna. You just get to just build more self-doubt, and those lead to unfortunate bad things. They just do.
What about you, Brian?
So I think you have to be ready to be on the helper side. You can't just, it's not for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I think you really have to be in a good spot to do it. And after my breakdown 8 years ago, I didn't just jump right in and start doing stuff. I actually had to get through my own stuff. And then as I got more and more comfortable, it turns out I'm pretty good at getting people to talk. Do that little group that we do. We've had 4 people who are going to put guns to their head. And one of them was ready to pull the trigger. And apparently I was talking to him on the phone and didn't know this. until a week later. But apparently I pissed him off enough. They wanted to fight me rather than shoot himself in the head. That's a true story. And he texted me the next week. He's like, I was literally had the gun in my hand. I was going to pull the trigger. And he's like, you just happened to call me. And I'm not a holy roller by any means, but there's just some weird fate-filled things that have happened in the last couple of years that just cannot be explained. And I'll argue till I'm blue in the face that tell me I just met I want to keep it vague, a retired cop who pulled the trigger inside of his cruiser and it misfired. This guy was a professional shooter. This guy never missed a target a day in his life. Pinpoint accuracy. How is it he puts the gun to his head and just misfires? Like, how does that happen? You can't tell me that's not fate. Like, so I'm talking to this guy a couple weeks ago, and I didn't know this guy, and now I started hammering him because I go at people pretty aggressively to break them down a little bit, and I got this guy to admit some things that he didn't want to talk about, and it broke the seal. Now it turns out he's interested in talking about his story to other law enforcement. I'll leave it at that. So you have to be ready, and it definitely takes a toll on us when we do it, and we need to find our own outlet. As I'm sure as a clinician, you're taking on all our problems, and at some point you have to go unload your backpack, because if you don't, it's not going to benefit anybody. So I think you really have to be in that mindset. And I get to that point where if you don't like me, I really don't, like you said, I really don't care. And if you're judging me based on having mental health issues, then your opinion to me really doesn't matter all that much, I'll be honest with you. So there are bigger, better, and tougher people than the three of us will ever be who have lost battles to mental health. So I wear it like a badge of honor. I know the number of people that I've helped and what I've done for people, and it fuels that fire every now and then. So getting the stigma is out there, but it's slowly but surely going away. And the more I talk about it at work, I'll do something and I'll tell the young kids at roll call, don't be me. Do not be me on the side of the road, hands and knees, bawling your eyes out. Don't be that guy. And slowly but surely they're starting to listen. So as long as I keep beating that drum and keep doing these things and keep telling the story, hopefully enough of these young kids that will take the hints and take the message and run with it.
Well, first of all, Brian, I do like you. You have the same haircut I do. So we're right on the same page. Eric, you're right there. I think this is the smart club right here. Number one. But more importantly, I think that you're right. I think that one of the things that's hard is that, I go to therapy very regularly. Sometimes it's once a month. When I have something really bad happen, it's once a week. And I have no qualms. I used to be, I'm a therapist. I'm not supposed to need therapy. I'm a freaking therapist. I know how to handle this crap. Turns out I don't know how to handle my own crap.
Right.
So I think that that's one of the things that I remind people before you try to help others. Remember, you need to have someone in your life, whether it's an outlet, it doesn't have to be therapy. I recommend therapy, obviously. But if you don't have these outlets, you're fucked. And that's, to me, the number one thing to do. And I think that I've seen a lot of, and don't take this the wrong way, Brian and Eric, but I've seen you old timers talk to the kids. And I think it's important that these kids hear it from you, because they come in full of piss and vinegar sometimes. And you're like, listen, take it easy. And when you need help, go get help. Don't wait till you're like, I joke around and I don't know why I set the 27. It's not the first incident that screws you up. It's the 27th one. And you need to be able to reach out. And I hope, Eric, I didn't insult you about your hair or your oldness, or how old you are.
Well, maybe, but.
All right, we'll talk off the air.
Fair enough.
But I think that you talk about talking to the kids, and I made it jokingly, but the truth is that you guys have that experience, and you got to talk to people who are just coming in and tell them those things. How do we get a culture that accepts that? Because you didn't say it in those words, Brian. I'm going to tell you what I've had is you have chiefs and deputy chiefs that really, really get it. And then there's some that don't get it as much. And this is as vague as I'm going to do it. If you want to hear more, call me. But ultimately, how do we get people like you? You're the guys in the front lines. How do we get to more people opening up about this? Because it's not an easy task, as you said, Brian. But we need some people to change their mentality.
So again, it just comes down to those conversations. So there's a documentary that I'm involved in. It was filmed a little over a year ago, should be released this summer. And there's a bunch of us pouring our hearts out and talking about the things that we've been through and telling these young kids that, listen, it's out there, and telling about these podcasts, sharing it, letting people know. And podcast I just did recently, my family listened to it. They never really have. I've never really shared it with them before, and I kind of opened their eyes up in a couple of quotes where I didn't realize that that's how bad it got. And we could save more marriages if we share with our spouses and our families, and we need to start telling them. I get to a point where I told my wife, like, when I come home from work, I need time. I need to decompress. I need to like settle my brain down a little bit and relax, as opposed to the chirping starts when you walk in the door. You know what I mean? So that doesn't help. So I think the big thing I've been pushing for is people to share with your family, share with your spouse. You don't have to give them details, but you can just tell them, listen, I had a really tough call yesterday. I'm kind of struggling with it. I just need some time. And I think if, my wife's really good about letting me just kind of have my peace and quiet and leave me alone. And I think that makes a big difference, because if you're not telling them and you're not sharing this information with them, how are they supposed to know how to handle it? How are they supposed to know how to talk to you if we're not talking to it, if we're not explaining it? We are good at sharing a ton of information on Facebook, but we're just not good about sharing our feelings. And the more we do it, the easier it gets. And the people I've been dealing with recently, they're sharing it with their spouses. They're letting them know that, listen, there's some things that I see at work, and this is why I might be moody or cranky or tired, as opposed to happy-go-lucky like you are when you come home from work. Well, our stress is a little bit different, involves death. Somebody that works in a bank or a grocery store doesn't have these type of issues. And we need to start relaying that information and start letting people know a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I think that our families and our friends don't always know what we go through. And I'm not putting myself in the same boat as you do, but I definitely hear some pretty horrific stories in my job. And you need to sit there and be supporting. And I've explained to a whole lot of people, like, if you call me after, I see about 8 people on Tuesdays, 8 to 10, depending on the week. When I'm done with my shift, don't call me. I don't want to talk to you. It's not personal. I just don't want to talk to you.
Right.
And it's not because of anything else, but me needing to just process. So this shit is off the boat, so to speak, because for me, it's like either I got to listen to like some music and just yell and scream. Sometimes I need some classical music just to calm my nerves. And sometimes it's complete silence. I'm driving in the silence. But it's not about one being more crazy than the other. It's just making sure that your needs are met. And I don't know, Eric, how you've experienced that with other people and how to communicate that. But I was wondering if you had same experiences as Brian said, sometimes you just need to tell your spouse or your families, I need space.
I do. I have experience in that. The one thing that I just want to bring where Brian started, it's important to have tons of different outlets, because, as important as it is to tell your family what's going on, whatnot, try and get them to understand. There's also times they just don't understand. They can't understand. And that's really hard. In my relationships, I've been in that situation, and it drives a divide, and it's hard. But that's why, groups and therapy and all these other things are great outlets. As vicious as the firehouse can be, hopefully there's at least somebody that they talk to. They listen. They get it. They live it. They do the exact same thing. But having another outlet is very important.
Yeah. And I think that it's not only the outlet of, I told you my outlets, but again, I have a therapist. I watch sports. I need to go for runs sometimes. I have my garden in the backyard. And some of you who have been listening to this podcast for a while, my buddy Jay, sometimes I talk to him or follow therapists just so that they know, because it's not like, and I think Brian said it best. If you're selling, I don't know, handbags on the phone, I know that doesn't exist anymore. Just trying to get it as vague as I can. You're facing a whole different thing than going on a call. And yeah, it's not always like horror, but sometimes it's difficult seeing the same person who's had 3 cancers, continue smoking, and now they're having, again, problems with breathing, and you got to bring them to the hospital. And then you think about your family members, or you think of other stuff that's related to your life. I think it's hard to tell people how that works in their lives. I don't know what you guys think about that, but that's kind of what I kind of tell people. Like, I can't tell you how difficult it can be to see very frustrating shit too.
Yeah.
It's usually, like I said earlier, it's the backstory. Not too long ago, to try to avoid any HIPAA issues, but the guy's getting transported for cancer. He's dying. And there's the wife of 25 plus years bawling her eyes out as we'll load him into the ambulance. Like that's gut wrenching. That's not okay. Like, because you picture yourself in that spot. And it doesn't take a Sandy Hook or a 9/11 to send people spiraling. It could be, I had a 49-year-old female commit suicide and it spun me up and I don't know why. I think my sister's age, my wife's age, like that age range, it's close. It just hit and I can't explain it. And I think everybody's issues are going to be different. How things impact me are not going to impact you. And we need to stop judging people based on the acuity of the call, the seriousness of the call, that it could be anything. If your kids have cancer and you transport a young kid with cancer, well, it's going to hit home and that's going to sting.
Yeah.
And I think we need to stop judging people based on what you think they should be upset about and start realizing that, listen, everybody's got their demons and everybody's got their issues and things are going to spin me up that won't affect you guys and vice versa. So until we stop judging and try to start giving people the benefit of the doubt and try to start understanding a little bit more of their mentality, I think that's a good start.
And I think that what I hear also from what you're saying is that something I've told before. I've had someone hold babies who are dying in their hands, and it's the third or fourth kid that happens that to really trigger them. I've also did treatment for trauma for a woman who saw a dead cat on the side of the road. Either way, it's trauma. I can't judge what trauma is for Brian or for Eric or for me. It's just what it is.
Right.
Do we have a way to change that mentality, Eric or Brian? I mean, I think that's what we got to tell these guys, because you go on more medical calls than fire calls at this point. And let's just face it, right? But medical calls can be much more gut wrenching than going into a raging fire. And those also are not happening all that often anymore. But how do we change that mentality that you got to wait till the trauma that breaks you to talk about it?
So that cancer call, we go back in the engine and we just kind of talk about it. It's really sad. We just kind of acknowledge it. Just that brief, as you mentioned, talking at the bumper and the coffee table, those are where some of the best conversations happen. That's what separates us from the police. The police jump in their cruisers. One goes east, west, north, and south. And we go back to the same spot. And we get to, when we do like a Monday morning quarterback of the call. What we're really doing is talk about the call, even though we're disguising it as a critique. Hey, did you get the defibrillation? Did you get the IV? Oh, you missed this. We're still talking about the call and the good and the bad. And I think that really, really, really helps. So I think that as we talk about those things and we acknowledge that, listen, that was kind of sad. And everybody in the engine is acknowledging, yeah, that was kind of sad. It's just kind of a way to acknowledge it publicly. And the more we do that, and the dead cat, I've seen way worse than that, but that's not the point. Like you said, trauma is trauma. We don't know what triggered that person to be upset about the dead cat. Maybe they had a house fire in the house and they lost 7 animals. Like my dog who's sitting in front of me, I'd be devastated if I lost my dog. So we don't know. So rather than judging and saying, listen, tough, it's a cat. Well, that's their cat, maybe, who knows? And that's their trauma. And I'm not going to sit here and downplay it because I'm this and I'm that. And one of the other things I preach is big city fire or small town fire. We're all on the same team. We all do the same things. City of Boston shows up with 40 guys on a structure fire. We show up with 11. There are towns near us that show up with 2. So we're all doing the same job. Some people have more, some people have less. And instead of judging people based on what we perceive as should be real calls or not, that's their issues, their trauma. We don't know their past. And we really need to stop judging based on what my perceived opinion of you is.
No. Anything bad? Bad. I mean, what's bad? But I think that happens more than we admit about like you said, the bumper and the coffee table and all that stuff. And just, it's important for us to kind of like look out for each other and make sure that, I mean, we all know, we live with each other. We eventually know, if somebody's getting divorced or whatever, they know, you know what's going on. And it's important for just, I don't know, older people, younger people, whoever, just to be able to speak up, like either guide them someplace or mention to somebody, say, hey, can I talk to you for a second, find out what's going on. And again, unfortunately, like you said, Steve, you can pass them a piece of paper or give them an email or a phone number or whatever. But it's important to just, care and just not just, be a good human being. Sometimes it's hard to be that just because, say, you're in a bad you have a bad crew, or I don't know, you're on overtime, you get stuck at that station, like, oh my God, I'm going to tell these guys. And then, but you see one of these guys like having a really freaking bad day. They start talking, and you're just like, if you can grab them someplace in the watch area or whatever, it's like, is everything cool? And just make that effort and make that phone call. I don't know. I've done it once or twice. Just called somebody out of the freaking blue. How's everything going? I think the person I actually talked to actually went and ended up talking to somebody, which is great. Not that I'm going to sit and, tell everybody, guess who I talked to. Unfortunately, that's some of the bad part of the fire service too. Telephone, telegraph, telefireman. But how to make that part of the culture? I mean, maybe it already is in a way because of what we already do, but it just needs to be, I don't know, get rid of the stigma. I don't know. Maybe if I could figure that out, I'd retire well.
Well, that sounds like a project, if you ask me.
Can I just touch on that real quick?
Yeah.
So one of the things you said is tell a friend, tell a firefighter, and the firehouse is worse than high school all day long, every day. I pride myself in being that person that doesn't talk about it. And people know it. I've been out on double dates with people, with my wife and another couple, and I will not. And I've had one person speak up, and I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. I just do not break that confidentiality. And once people realize, like, they'll drop little hints to try to see if I'm going to talk about it, and they realize it's not going anywhere and it stays locked in, then they'll build that trust and they'll wind up talking to you more and more. So we have to be that. We have to be that person who's going to say, listen, high school bullshit stops here. You're having issues. We're not going to talk about it. And we also need to know when things are above us, or I'm not experienced. I don't have an addiction problem. I don't drink much at all. They make fun of me on my normal Zoom. I have a tropical island in the background. They always make fun of me. Yeah, listen, I like a nice pina colada like on the beach like anybody else, but I don't have an addiction problem. So if somebody's having a raging addiction problem, I'm going to find somebody that is more qualified to handle it than me. And I've done that too, and knowing our limits. And I think that helps. And once people know that you're going to take the time to find them somebody, they build more trust. And then once the word gets out that you're trustworthy, more and more people will reach out. And my phone's getting blown up almost daily now. It's a good problem to have, but
no, it is. That's awesome.
Stressful too sometimes, like you say.
Very stressful. Yeah.
Need that break.
A couple of things that you guys said and I really want to touch base on is that the competition thing and the real calls. If you can define to me what a real call is, I'm very interested, because I don't think there's such a thing as a fake call. They're all real calls to me. Anyway, so I let's start off with that. And whether you're in Boston with 40 guys or you're in, shout out to the hometown of Hopedale with 2 guys.
Right.
One's better than the other? No, there's just different numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that the competition of that is something I would say is like what happens in a small town doesn't happen necessarily in a big town and vice versa, but that still doesn't make one better than the other. It's not a competition. We got to stop thinking that way. That would be the first thing I would say. And that's the fire has it better than police, or police has it better than EMTs or paramedics. I don't care. I just don't care. It doesn't matter where it comes from. It has to be talked about. And I think that we need to work on that mentality. And I get what you're saying in regards to having a lot of phone calls. I pride myself as someone who does a lot of mental health for first responders, truly enjoy it. Obviously, I do a podcast every single season on first responders, and I will continue to do so until you guys tell me to shut up. But I also know that I get a lot of phone calls too. And at one point, I don't have any openings. And recently, I will not name the insurance company that took me off their list as a first responders specialty because I didn't do their little training. And I'm like, you're deserving the first responders when doing that, right? Because it's not a training that if you gave it Brian or you gave it Eric or someone like that, I'd be sitting there learning under the tree, and that's what I want to learn. Another therapist, I don't know how that is really relevant for me to lose that little check mark. And I frankly don't care because I still will get the referrals. But I think it brings up the question that I brought up before on this podcast is how do we find good therapists? How do we find people who can work with first responders? Because I think there is a cultural thing that is very, very hard to explain in words, even in this podcast, unless you guys disagree.
No. I know where I'm from. There's a lot of, how can I say this? The community I work in, there's some people truly believe there's a culture issue in our department. of whatever, very old school, and whether it be old boy network or whatever. But I mean, culture's fire service. It's old. It's there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of there's a lot of pride. There's a lot of ego. There's a lot of things. There's a lot of bravado. There's a lot of our job carries a lot of weight. It really does. When people call, like I know on the podcast I did before with Jay, when people call 911, I've never seen anyone be, oh God, here the fire department. They usually the police show up to think, oh God, the cops are here, but a fire department here, like where the cavalry's here, they're here to help. But what happens if we can't help? I'm kind of getting off the topic of culture, but how people see us and what we actually do. I think more things like this will let public know that it's not always taking cats out of the tree or running into burning buildings, but it's dealing with people. And it's hard to explain that. We're back to where we were, but
no, I think that it's exactly like, for me, if you see a culture clash between old school versus new school, whatever people want to call it, I really don't care. We need those clashes in a good way, because that's how we grow from it. If we just sit in our corners and do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, that's called insanity. But I think that when I talk about clashes, I think clashes, if we use it as a growth exercise versus going back to our corners of what we know, that's when it's the sitting in our corners makes us worse. Taking that clash and learning from it, now that's going to bring us somewhere. But I know you wanted to talk, Brian, a little bit of that stuff about culture, therapists, and how to get people to know a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to throw that in.
Sure. So you mentioned, small town Hopedale probably has 2 guys on, right? So in a town where I work, we have probably daytime population of 100,000 plus whatever we have. We're busy. We have major highways. We have a huge population. Some people know people, but you go to Hopedale Fire probably knows 80% of the towns. I know a dispatcher who knows significant number of people out of the fatalities, knew like 8 out of 10 in the last couple of years. They all know each other in these small towns. So again, that's why I go to, you can't sit there and say, well, you know what, Boston had 17 stabbings. Well, Hopedale had 1, but everybody in the town knew that person. Versus in the city of Boston, there's probably only a small percentage of people that knew that person. So could you say that the impact is the same in Hopedale as it is in the big city of Boston? So that's why I sit there and say, you can't judge. I can't sit there and say, well, it's Hopedale. They don't do anything. Well, they know everybody. So when there is a fatality, there is a young kid killed, they all know them. The kids went to school together. They were the coach. They were the Girl Scout, Boy Scout leader, whatever. So we really need, that's why we need to get away from that. And the culture comes down to this. There are police chiefs who are actively sitting there saying, that mental health is garbage. Unfortunately, we have a small percentage of people in the police, fire, your line of work, my line of work, who abuse the system, right? That fake their injury right before the summer, every single year, the same person every year has a leg injury right before the summer. The same person right before Christmas has a 3-month injury that just happens to get through. That happens. It's rare, but it does happen. So I think the police chiefs become kind of bitter and they don't take it too seriously. I work for a department who is very peer sport friendly. The chief called me when I had that 49-year-old suicide. And he's like, it didn't look that bad. I'm like, I can't explain it. It just hit me. I can't explain it. He goes, okay. Do you need to go anyway? Do you need to do anything? I'm like, nope. I got a peer sport meeting in my neighborhood tonight. I'm going. Let me know what you need. So that keeps you saying, listen, I know that if I fall, that I have support. And that goes a big way. Versus other chiefs who are looking to bury people at the first chance they get. And that goes for police and fire. I would like to say that there's probably, if I had to bet, there's probably less than 10% of the senior executive leadership in the police and fire who actually generally will go to the trenches and go to war for their people. And if we start changing those numbers, we can change the culture. But it has to start at the top. And then the other side is, just because I have a chief who doesn't care doesn't mean I can't go find other resources, because there's a million of them out there, and we need to start finding those other avenues. You mentioned therapists. Therapists, man, it's tough to find one right now. It is really, really, really tough. And it's really find one. And I tell people it's like dating. I don't like the looks of this guy. I don't trust him. You show up in a suit and tie, you're done to me. You're done. I'm out. I don't want you. Because I want you showing up in jeans and a t-shirt. You're like, hey man, you had a shitty day, huh? Let's talk about it. That's what I want. Versus somebody else who may go, no, if you're not in a suit and tie, you're not legit. So it all depends. So we have to start looking at other options. nutrition, diet, anxiety, instead of sitting on the couch in a dark room. Everything I've read about anxiety, and you're the expert, if I'm having a raging anxiety attack and I'm to the point where like I'm losing it, instead of shutting my blinds and shutting the windows and the doors and sitting in my bed, I need to get out and go for a walk. Torture me. It's going to be awful. I'm going to hate my life, but by the time I get back, significant amount of weight's going to come off. We need to start preaching those other things until we can get to you, the professionals. Diet, exercise, nutrition, magnesium supplements that have been great for me. They might not work for everybody, but they've worked for me. And we need to start finding these other plan Bs until we can get to the experts. And I wish there was more of you guys coming out of school, because we definitely need them. There was a dear friend of mine, police SWAT, watched a child get beheaded, went to a therapist, and she said, you need to leave work at work. What is he supposed to do with that information? Like, what do you do with that? So he got turned off the therapist. Versus if somebody who's at least in the field who gets it, right? Like, that's not what we're supposed.
Shit, I'm usually not without words, but damn.
That's a true story. And this is a 32-year friend of mine. So that'd be like me saying, listen, people have heart attacks. Like, we're leaving. Like, death is death. It is what it is. You can't do that. That's like negligence.
Crazy.
And
wow.
That's why it's really hard to find a good clinician. And they're out there, but like you said, you see an 8 to 10 on Tuesday. And I know one who's going 6 days a week and takes the 7th day, just as like shuts everything off and just has to decompress. And I said, well, what are you doing? She says, too busy. So she doesn't really have an outlet. So, and the same thing, if we keep piling this on you guys, it's going to break you guys as well. And we need you. We need more of you, not less of you. So,
well, I'll come up with a couple of things that you said before we go on, but this is one of my standing statements that I say regularly. 95% of firefighters, therapists, they want to go do their job, get home safe. That's all they care about. They're not trying to do. There's a 5%, they're fucking assholes.
Sure.
And that's just how it is. And we want to argue all that you want, but that's just life. And I think that having therapists, when you talk about cultural competency, that's why I was like speechless. I mean, I remember going to one of my first calls that was at I went to the ER, and I'm going to keep it as vague as I can, but there was a firefighter who had a SIDS, their own kid, SIDS.
Jesus.
And I didn't say, well, you've seen that before in your job. Come on, man, fucking shape up. No, right. I showed compassion. I talked to the guy and I let him say whatever he had to say. Because the other part too, that again, this is where I think cultural competency becomes very important. When I was done with him, went to see my note, but I knew the police had to interview him because that's how it fucking works. So I let the interview happen. And then I said, all right, let's talk a little more, because that also fucks you up. When the police, they have to do their job. I get the police are doing their job. But I think that there's a cultural competency that needs to be done sometimes. And I think that that's what I would talk about when I talk about cultural competency. And if you can't get out of your house because of your anxiety, then eat better, work out. You can run in place. You can lift can of beans. Who cares? But there are other options. And if you can't find a therapist that you like, that therapist should lose their fucking license. This is my 2 cents. But if I'm not your cup of tea, which I'm not everyone's cup of tea, and I'm okay with that, I'll find you someone who might be a coffee or another hot beverage for all that matter. But that doesn't mean that I'm bad. It just means it's not the right fit.
It's like dating. You didn't marry. Very few people marry the first person they meet. You know what I mean? My wife and I were not each other's first meets. You just have to go through it. And like, you might not be the guy for me, but I might take 3 or 4 people to finally get the one that I kind of like, okay, I can talk to this person. And that's okay. And there's no shame in it. We're not all Donald Trump and these rich billionaires are not asking me out for coffee and golf games. I get it. We're not all in the same clique. So we just have to make our efforts to find that person that you just kind of trust. And we're getting battered too. I've seen some things on some social media groups where go home, get drunk, I'll keep it clean, chase a girl for the night and just call it a night. I'm like, that's literally the worst advice you can give somebody. Why would you say that? And this was only like 3 months ago. This wasn't like 10 years ago. Like, that's not the mentality. Stop telling people that. That is literally a horrible idea. So once I get the training, gentleman in the Boston area named Tom Greenlaw, who really, if you know him, that guy, he's good. And he taught me a lot when I took his classes, and really kind of led by example of how to get people to talk. And as long as there's people like him out there spreading the word and teaching us how to talk to other people, we need to be culturally competent, your words, to talk to other people. I can't sit there and say, listen, I get it. I've been there, done that. It's not the same. My story is not your story. So I think sometimes if we just sit there, shut our mouth and listen, I think that goes a long way.
Is that your experience too, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, you just have to show empathy. You just do. I don't know. Personally, I think that's kind of got me through stuff. Not that I'm sitting and tell stories, but just like crazy medicals. Like we had Lou Gehrig's disease. 3 times in one night, guy fell out of bed. He's fully competent in his brain, but can do nothing. How do you, and this is his wife is sitting there knowing that, his time is coming. And it's the 15th call of the day. It's 4:30 in the morning. You're exhausted. And there's somebody bitches in the back of the engine. And it's like, you just take a deep breath and be like, he's just having a bad day. Just like, you know what I mean? He's dealing with a lot. And if you can do that and then maybe try and, I don't know, approach it when things are different, but empathy, just another human being's having a bad day. So,
well, as some people know, if you've ever been in, like I've talked about this in my podcast again, but if you're a client of mine, Brian or Eric, you come in and you ask me how I'm doing, and my answer is exactly how I'm doing. I'm not going to say good just to make you happy. If I'm having a bad day, I'm going to be like, you know what? Kids were driving me crazy today, or traffic was crazy, or it's not always a complaint, I promise. But, fucking Bruins beat the Canadians again, motherfuckers.
That's a good day.
No, it's a bad day for some of us. Okay. But ultimately, like, I do what my job, and people are like, why do you do that? Because I'm showing what authenticity and truthfulness is. So, and I've always joked around when I first meet people, if you don't want to know how I'm doing, don't ask me, because I'm going to tell you the truth, whether you like it or not.
Right. Some people aren't ready for the answer.
Right. So, like if I'm doing good, I'm going to say, yeah, pretty good. Tomorrow's a new day. Maybe tomorrow's going to be crap. But I think that part of the job as a therapist too, for me, you talk about cultural competency. I'll never sit there and say, Brian, please tell me about trauma number 17 on your list right here. And if you're on YouTube, you'll see me just point. No, I'm not going to do that. Hey, what's going on, Brian? Because you may not want to talk about trauma number 17. You might just want to talk about conflict with XYZ. I'm just going to I don't wish conflict on you, but talk about that. And some people are waiting for me to give them the answer. And I'm like, I'll tell you, as a therapist, I've never fixed a human being in my life. I give them the tools to fix themselves, but I've never fixed a human being in my life. I can't even fix myself properly. I can't fix other people.
Right.
So I think that that's the other part too, is that if you go to therapy and you think I have like, oh, wait, I'm going to go get the magic wand just for you. That doesn't work that way.
There is no magic pill. And it's like an alcoholic. Until they're ready to accept changes that they need to make in life, there's nothing that you or I can do or say that's going to change anything. People have to be ready for it. And until even people that hit rock bottom, a firefighter in the New England area, I'll keep it vague, just up and left their family and moved to California because they wanted to continue to do drugs. And it's like you literally just threw away your family and your career over drugs. But no matter what we do or say to this person, nothing's worked. So they're stuck in their ways, and there's only so much fight you can put into people who are not willing to make the changes. You can make the suggestions. During the height of anxiety, you need to get your ass out of bed. Crawl out of that house if you have to. Just lift a can. Do something. Nope. I'll lay in bed. Well, it's not going to get better. It only gets better when you decide, bleep this, I have to fight back. I have to get up and I have to move. And until you do that, then you're just going to continue in that circle. And that rabbit hole just keeps going deeper and deeper until you decide to pull yourself out of it. And I can't pull you out. You can't pull anybody out. I don't care who you are. You have to be willing to make the changes to say, I'm done. I am absolutely done. I need to fix myself. I didn't get the help I needed until I broke. I kind of knew it was coming. I told my wife it was coming, and it just hit me one day that I had 2 of the 3 worst calls of my career happen 7 days apart, and it sunk me. So I waited. And thank God I was open enough to the therapy and the help And I said, I don't want to lose what I have. So I let it all fly on the table. And whatever the therapist said, I talked about it often. And anybody that would listen, I would tell people. And when I did come back to work, I told people, listen, I don't know what's going to take. I may be done. One more baby call, I might be walking off the job. So it just takes a lot I had to be ready for it. And if I wasn't frustrated with how I knew what I knew what was going on, I knew I was having issues. And until I finally said, enough's enough, I need to fix myself. I'm not saying I don't have bad days. I still have bad days. But overall, I know what I have to do to keep myself out of it. So it certainly helped.
I'll make a deal with you, Brian. The day you don't have any bad days and you've solved everything, you be my therapist. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah. Because it happens, and there's things that hit us, and for whatever reason, it just makes it a bad day. But that stupid cliche of tomorrow's a new day is a very real thing. And up until 2015, I would have probably made fun of you for saying that. But now I'm like, tomorrow's a new day. Just gotta get through today and it'll be okay. So
I go back to one of my favorite, I don't know what to call it. It was a clip at best. And I can't remember who was on there, but I remember Tom Hanks. And he said, the best advice I ever got is, on my worst day, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
And on my best day in the world, this too shall pass. And remembering that this will pass no matter what it is. And people might say that's negative or positive or whatever. No, I think it's realistic, because my best day in the world, it's not going to last forever. My worst day in the world won't last forever. And learning to do that. But I think I want to bring up another thing too, is we didn't get to touch base the last time Eric was on, but I know that, Brian, you also know a little bit about this. This is something that's been coming up even in my conversations with my work, my clients, and it's cancer. And what I mean by that is that the equipment that had, there's a lot of reports now that shows that the equipment that you use for fire in particular can also cause cancer. So not only are you going into buildings, if we're in the New England area, you got buildings from the 1700s full of God knows what. And then you get faced with cancer, but also the equipment you put on may also cause you cancer. And I know, Eric, you wanted to talk a little bit about that and how are people dealing with that? Because that's a very big concern, I think, in the fire departments and across the country, frankly.
Yeah, it's the IFF just actually, I believe, it's filed a lawsuit against either manufacturer or the NFPA. I'm not 100% sure, but it's just another thing like just to worry about. You think that, you're preached in, drill school, wear your gear, and then come to find out it's hurting you. It's another one of just stresses that you just deal with. When you get on, everybody knew, like, the old salty guy. When I got on a while ago, everyone's, if your stuff was pitch black, your helmet looked like it was a piece of charcoal. You see some guy friggin' hanging out a window, yelling instead of using a radio. He's not have a mask on. He's some tough guy. Well, unfortunately, those guys probably die within a year after they retire. Well, not those. I mean, it was just the way it was. It was a culture thing. It's taken a very, very long time to change the importance of bunker gear, the importance of safety, and all those things. And now, come to find out, that's hurting you too. It's frustrating, personally. It just is. It's just the job in general. It's a publicly funded place. Tax dollars pay for it. It's one thing we didn't touch on before, but it just the lack of understanding from municipalities and cities of what it actually takes to actually run a fire department. Like what do we, our health is important. It's not like we go and sit at a computer all day and we make sure we have an ergonomical chair and correct keyboard and whatnot, so we don't get carpal tunnel. But we technically
don't shit on my job. Thank you very much.
we live in garages.
Yes.
We live next to diesel engines. Diesel puts out carcinogens. I know there's a huge push for electric fire trucks, but I don't know, when those batteries burn, that stuff's pretty bad too. But cancer is just, it's one of those things. I don't want to say when you get on, you accept. But yeah, if you take precautions and you're smart and you wash your gear and you wear your SPBA, yeah. But life in itself is dangerous. It just is. Fires are down, which is good. But come to find out that the gear that they've preached for you to wear to keep you safe actually has stuff in it that could possibly increase your cancer risk is frustrating. It truly is.
So I'm the union president where I am, and I attend the state meetings, and the facts are out there. We are getting cancer from it. Eddie Kelly, the the general president of the IFF for North America, he is very clear that we're suing these PFAS, companies that made these gear because it's there. They're doing a study out of Worcester right now with recruits who are just burning pellets and hay, and they have carcinogens and PFAS in their gear, and they're not in real structure fires. So it's coming from the gear, it's leaking from the gear. I think the days of going to a smells and bells, hey, I burnt my food, and we're, gearing up. Those days are coming to an end, which that one time in 20 years, you're going to show up to something that's going to be a rip-roaring fire. Well, then we get dressed quickly. Like, we're adults. This is what we do. We train for it. We know how to get dressed quickly. And it is sad when you see every state meeting, we stand up and we, do the Pledge of Allegiance, and we do a moment of silence for those that are lost. And when they're reading the names, age 30, age 40, cancer, 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 cancer. And you sit there and say, how much did they wear their gear? You know what I mean? Did they wear their mask? Did they, wear their mask at a car fire? Those are the, and it is sad to see. We lost a firefighter a little over a year ago to cancer, never got to retire. So we have a couple others who have popped up with cancer, and they're just getting younger and younger. So that is a concern. Not only do you have to worry about the structure fires getting you, the people driving, hitting you. We just had a shooting in front of our fire station door a couple weeks ago. There's little things, and now you're adding chances of you getting cancer are pretty high now, as opposed to it might happen. The numbers are showing that people in our department are going to get cancer.
Yeah.
We have to be ready for it. So I've had enough funerals for a career.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that in itself, to me, is also what's causing some stressors besides the cancer and the gear. Then you got to go to a funeral. And then you think about, what about me? What about my colleagues? I mean, you talked about being the union president. I think that, you start worrying about other people because, firefighter is a brotherhood, and you're going to go to the funeral of your brotherhood from Springfield, Massachusetts to Springfield, Arizona. I don't know if there's a Springfield, Arizona. It's just a good guess. But ultimately, I think that that's what you guys do. And then you start thinking about your own stuff. And I think that people, I don't think people understand that going to these funerals is not just sitting there going, oh yeah, okay, let's hit the Irish whiskey and get on our way. No, it's a lot more than that. And just wanted to throw that out too.
Yep. Yeah. It's another very real problem that we face. So the list keeps getting bigger, and our resources are getting few and far between with the lack of resources out there right now. So,
well, speaking of resources, because, one of the things I want to talk about, and this is going to be somewhat timely. I usually try not to put dates on my podcast because I want people to listen anytime. A couple of things. I know that there's the 12th annual Mental Health and Law Enforcement Conference that's coming to Fitchburg State on June 7th. And I know that this is going to be coming out at the end of May. So if people want to go there, that's a great place to learn about. I know a lot of the presenters. Actually, our own Jay Ball, who comes onto my podcast, will be one of the presenters there, and I plan on heckling him. Sorry, Jay, if you don't listen to this beforehand. But I know that there's other stuff that's coming up, Brian. I know that you wanted to talk about that. So what's coming up that could be very interesting for law enforcement, first responders in general?
So I will try to sum up a dream of mine was saving the world. Sounds kind of corny, but it's kind of true. We've forgotten about our dispatchers. We've forgotten about the nurses and the ER doctors who are struggling, the tow truck drivers who are taking these vehicles out with dead people in the cars. So we were going to plan an event for April, and then we just got blown up with interest, and we outgrew the facility. So we have to push it out to October. We're trying to nail down a date and a location. If anybody listening has a conference center that'll hold between 200 and 300 people, call me. What we're looking to do is have a place. We're looking to have some pretty well-known speakers, Steve Holmes, Keith Hanks, Mike Segru, if we can get him back. He was coming in April. He's a well-known on the police side of things. And we're going to invite everybody, police, fire, EMS, nurses, doctors, anybody that wants to come. We forget about the medical examiner's office, these people that are going to these horrific scenes. We forget about them, the funeral directors, the organ banks. We forget about them. So the goal is to have vendors there who will have list of resources, and you can show up and you can get to meet some therapists, some facilities. Scars and Stripes is a veteran first responder nonprofit that is very big. Gary's doing some great work. We're looking at Forge VFR. We're looking at Shatterproof as some sponsors. We're looking for more We just want people to show up and be able to talk to these vendors and talk to these facilities, talk to clinicians, and find out that there's other things out there that work. We don't need to be on benzos to try to fix our problems. We can try massage. We can try chiropractic. We can try yoga. We can try all kinds of other things, breath work, mind mapping, all these other treatments that are out there. You can talk about it, experience it, see it, and talk to the experts. And we're looking to nail that down sometime in October. We're just looking to find a facility that can hold us. Initially, we thought 50 would be a great turnout. It looks like we're going to blow that away without any real advertising. We were hitting well over 100. So we might have 200 to 300 people showing up. So, and we're hoping that people like yourselves can show up and refer us, and have people show up that are, listen, I'm a little scared. I don't know what to do. And hear Keith's story and Steve's story and Mike Segru's story, and know that it's okay. And these are the resources that if you break, these are, and we're hoping to have 25 different vendors there to kind of display what they do and talk about what they do. And we're hoping this is successful as we're hoping it's going to be, as it appears it's going to be. And we want everybody out there to get the help that they need, or at least be pointed in the right direction.
Well, that's good to know. And as soon as you have a date, I'll put it on my the podcast link so people can see it in the podcast link there. But I also will say to you right now, I do commit my time to you if you need anyone, Brian, because this is a very important thing for me, as probably you've figured it out at this point, but just in case.
I'll send everybody will get invites.
And Eric, anything you want to talk about or plug or?
No, just you've blown me away, Brian. Really have.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that, there are people like you out there that, I've been around 24 years. I'm in the PFFM too. And if I went digging a root around, I probably would have found you. Do you know what I mean? But I'm just, I'm proud to know you. Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I have a few ideas also I'll talk to you off air, Brian, but I can't tell you how important it is for me I joke around, but it's not really a joke. I say, why I take first responders first and foremost is that they're the ones who are taking care of my medical, my fire, or my safety in the community. I think I should put them first. That's just how I see my job as a therapist. And I think the community, I have a lot of listeners that are going to listen to this. Just remember that. Yeah, it's not easy. We're happy to see the firefighter. We're not happy to see the police. But sometimes the firefighter, even if you're happy to see him, he might be tired, or she might be tired. She might be having a hard time, or he's having a hard time. Just remember that no matter what job you have in this world, you are a human being first and foremost. Those human beings need help. And if it's yoga, it's yoga. If it's therapy, it's therapy. If it's inpatient, it's inpatient. But let's never forget that. So thank you, Brian. I hope to have you back on. I think that you and Jay it would be a great conversation. I can just sit back, go get a coffee, and let you guys talk. But, and Eric, I hope you have you back on, because I really like talking to you. And it's important, because I think that for me, we can know about stuff, but we need to hear it from other human beings. And I think that that's what you really represent. I always have like having you on. So please consider coming back at some point too.
Sure. No problem.
I'm available.
Thank you guys.
Anytime, so.
Oh yeah. How do we contact you? Do we put that in the show notes?
So yeah, you can, my information is public. I'm not worried about stalkers at my age. Nobody cares about me that much. So my cell number is 774-766-0852. I'll probably send you the voicemail if I don't know who you are. Shoot me a text, and then I'll know to pick up. My email is just my name, B Harkins, Harkins. The number is 2814@gmail.
And that will be all in the show notes. And Brian, thank you for putting yourself out there. As Eric said, he was blown away. I can tell you that I was blown away too. And the more I can get this out there as a message, if that's my little thing that I do to help 4 or 5 guys out of the world, I've done my job. So I'm sure that you're helping more than 4 or 5 guys, Brian. So I do appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Well, this concludes episode 102. Thank you so much, Eric. Thank you so much, Brian. I'm going to put all those notes in the show notes, so please go check them out. But on episode 103, I'm going to have 2 more guests, which I'm looking forward to talking to. Lane Kennedy and Tamar Medford. We're going to have a great conversation in regards to substance use, and I hope you join me then.
Please like, subscribe, and follow this podcast on your favorite platform. A glowing review is always helpful. And as a reminder, this podcast is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. If you're struggling with a mental health or substance abuse issue, please reach out to a professional counselor for consultation. If you are in a mental health crisis, call 988 for assistance. This number is available in the United States.